Mercedes just got hit with a rule change they never saw coming, and it could destroy one of their biggest advantages overnight. The FIA is stepping in with an emergency move targeting downforce behavior, right in the middle of a crisis where cars are already losing massive speed on straights due to energy limits. Inside the paddock, tension is exploding. Because this isn't just about one technical trick being banned. It's about power shifting, teams losing control, and a system so unstable that even the FIA is now rewriting the rules mid-fight. And if this change hits as hard as expected, Mercedes won't be the only team affected. At first, this didn't look like a direct attack on Mercedes. It looked like a technical adjustment. A necessary reaction to a system that was already under pressure. Because across the grid, teams were dealing with the same growing issue. Cars that looked fast, but couldn't sustain that speed when it mattered most. On paper, everything worked. High downforce, strong grip, impressive cornering speeds. But the moment the cars hit the straights, the reality changed. They weren't just accelerating. They were fighting the air. And that fight was draining energy faster than expected. Now here's where things start to connect. Because in a system like this, where every bit of aerodynamic efficiency matters, the smallest advantage becomes incredibly powerful. And Mercedes understood that. They didn't just build a fast car. They built a system. A way to control airflow, to manage drag, to extract performance not just in corners, but across the entire lap. And in an era where energy is limited, that kind of efficiency becomes gold. Because if you can reduce drag, even slightly, you use less energy. If you use less energy, your battery lasts longer. And if your battery lasts longer, you avoid the biggest problem of all. That sudden drop in power. So while other teams were struggling to balance performance and energy, Mercedes found a way to manage both. And that's where the attention started to shift. Because in Formula One, when one team finds something that works better than the rest, it doesn't stay hidden for long. Other teams start asking questions. They start analyzing. They start pushing for answers. And eventually, those questions reach the FIA. Now here's the key moment. Because this isn't happening in a stable environment. This is happening in the middle of a crisis. A system where cars can lose massive speed on straights because the battery runs out. A system already being questioned by drivers. A system already under review by the FIA itself. So when the governing body looks at something that could give one team an advantage in managing that problem, it doesn't just see innovation. It sees imbalance. And that's when intervention becomes inevitable. But here's what makes this situation different. This isn't a long-term clarification. This isn't something planned for the next season. This is immediate. An emergency response. And that changes everything. Because teams don't have time to adapt. They don't have time to redesign. They are forced to react instantly. And for Mercedes, that means one thing. Whatever advantage they had is now under threat. Not gradually. Not over time. Right now. And that's exactly why the tension inside the team is so high. Because in Formula One, losing an advantage isn't just about being slightly slower. It's about losing position. Losing control. Losing momentum in a championship that punishes even the smallest drop in performance. And the most dangerous part? This might only be the beginning. And this is where the situation stops being technical and becomes personal. Because when a rule change targets something this specific, this suddenly, teams don't just see regulation. They see intent. Inside Mercedes, this isn't just about losing performance. It's about losing something they worked hard to build, something they understood better than anyone else. And that creates pressure. Not just on the engineers, on the drivers, on the leadership. Because now, every lap becomes a question. How much did we lose? Where did we lose it? And can we get it back, fast enough? But here's where things get even more intense. Because the FIA didn't step in randomly. This decision is connected to a much bigger issue. The entire system is under stress. Cars are demanding too much energy. Too much drag is forcing the battery to drain faster. And once that energy is gone, performance collapses. That's the real problem. And it's affecting everyone. So from the FIA's perspective, anything that amplifies imbalance, anything that allows one team to manage that crisis better than others, becomes a risk. Not just competitively. Structurally. Because if one team solves the problem while others can't, the gap doesn't just grow. It becomes locked in. And that's exactly what Formula One tries to avoid. So when Mercedes found a way to optimize airflow, reduce drag, and extend performance on the straights, it didn't just make them faster. It made them more efficient in a system where efficiency is everything. And that's what triggered the reaction. But here's the twist. This isn't happening in isolation. At the same time this emergency rule change is being pushed, the FIA is already studying something even bigger. A drastic reduction in overall downforce for the future. which means Mercedes is facing pressure from two directions. Short term, their current advantage is being limited. Long term, the entire concept they've optimized for might disappear. And that creates a dangerous scenario. Because now the team has to make decisions without certainty. Do they keep developing their current approach, knowing it might be restricted again? Or do they start preparing for a completely different philosophy? There is no clear answer. Only risk. And while Mercedes deals with that uncertainty, other teams are watching closely. Some are relieved. If a leading concept is weakened, the gap closes. Others are cautious. Because if the FIA is willing to act this quickly, no idea is safe. And that changes how everyone operates. Innovation becomes more careful. Aggressive development becomes a gamble. And suddenly, the entire grid is thinking differently. But here's where the tension reaches its peak. Because for Mercedes, this isn't just about adapting. It's about responding under pressure. They don't have the luxury of time. They don't have the comfort of stability. They have to react immediately. And in Formula One, reacting is always harder than leading. Because when you're leading, you control the direction. When you're reacting, you're chasing it. And that's the shift happening right now. Mercedes is no longer just pushing forward. They are adjusting, recalculating, trying to stay ahead in a system that is changing beneath them. And that leads to one final, unavoidable question. If the FIA is willing to intervene this quickly, and is already preparing even bigger changes for the future, how long can any team hold on to an advantage before it disappears? Because in this version of Formula One, the rules aren't just defining the game. They're rewriting it in real time. And now we reach the point where this stops being about Mercedes, and starts becoming a warning for the entire grid. Because what just happened proves something much bigger. No advantage is safe anymore. Not even the smartest ones. Not even the ones built within the rules. Because when the system itself is under pressure, the rules can change at any moment to protect it. And that changes how Formula One works at its core. Think about it. Teams spend months, sometimes years, developing one idea. Refining it. Perfecting it. Building an entire car around it. And just when it starts delivering results, it can be taken away. Not gradually. Instantly. That's exactly what Mercedes is dealing with right now. But here's the deeper consequence. This doesn't just affect performance. It affects confidence. Because now every team has to ask the same question. Is it worth pushing the limits if those limits can suddenly move? Is it worth investing everything into one concept if that concept can be restricted overnight? And that hesitation is dangerous. Because Formula One has always thrived on innovation. On teams taking risks. On engineers finding solutions others can't see. But when the risk of losing everything increases, the way teams innovate begins to change. They become more cautious, more conservative, less willing to explore extreme ideas. And that slowly reshapes the sport. But here's where everything connects back to the original crisis. The FIA is not acting randomly. They are reacting to a system that is already unstable. Cars that consume too much energy. Cars that lose performance unpredictably. Cars that force drivers to manage instead of race. And when one team finds a way to navigate that instability better than others, it exposes the imbalance even more. So from the FIA's perspective, stepping in is not just about fairness. It's about control. Controlling a system that is getting closer to its limits. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because it reveals the real direction of Formula One. Not just faster cars. Not just better racing. But tighter control over how performance is achieved. And that leads to something even bigger. Because if the FIA is already stepping in now, during the early phase of this regulation, what happens when the full-scale changes arrive? Because the sport is already studying a massive reduction in downforce for the future. A change that could redefine how every car is designed. And if that happens, what Mercedes is experiencing now could happen to everyone. Entire concepts becoming obsolete. Entire philosophies being reset. Entire advantages disappearing. Which means this isn't just Mercedes losing something. This is Formula One preparing for a transformation. A shift away from the current balance. A shift away from the current way of extracting performance. And for teams, that creates a new kind of pressure. Not just to be fast, but to be ready for change. Because the teams that survive these moments are not always the fastest. They are the ones that adapt the quickest. And that brings everything back to the situation inside Mercedes. Because right now, they are facing the hardest challenge in Formula One. Not building speed, but recovering it after losing something critical. Under pressure. With limited time. In a system that is still evolving. And that's where the real story is. Not just whether Mercedes can regain their advantage, but whether they can adapt faster than the changes coming next. Because if they can't, Then this emergency rule change won't just slow them down. It will mark the moment where the balance of power in Formula One quietly begins to shift.